Welcome back to Conversations for the Good. Hello, Dr. Jane.
Good morning, Anna. How are you?
I'm doing good. I've been really looking forward to our conversation today. We've discussed many dimensions of creating and implementing change. Our focus has been aligning with our best selves and having the life that we want. We ended our last conversation with inventing ourselves, reviewing how to sustain our plan. Yet we live in a world of infinite distractions, as you and I both know. So, how do we navigate this reality?
Well, you are so right about this. The world is incredibly distracting, especially with the constant lure of technology, all the pings and the dings of the emails and Instagrams and Facebook and texts. These present a real sense of urgency. That it's habit forming and it's difficult to restrain ourselves. And there's a new term that's arisen in the culture. It's FOMO, FOMO, fear of missing out. And it's interesting because this fear is really what triggers the compulsive tracking of every device that we have, sometimes even before we're aware of the notification sounds or lights. So first, let's just step back and see how distractions work, or I should say, how they work us. Because distractions are any stimulus. It can be a thing, it can be a thought, an event, a feeling, anything that draws us from a task that is really of primary interest for us, something that I'm working on in the moment. So I'm involved in doing something that I want to do, maybe even it could be something I really want to accomplish. It might be at home or work or really engaging with a loved one. And there's an activity that is, or I should say, our activity is interrupted or maybe delayed or left unaccomplished because something is pulling me away. Something is really grabbing my attention and pulling it away.
Yes, this is the story of my life, Dr. Yeah, truly it is.
Mine too.
It happens several times a day. I'm involved in something that's important, and then all of a sudden, the next thing I know, I'm headed in another direction.
Well, and it happens to all of us, Anna. And sometimes, it's a simple interruption, and we can return very quickly to whatever our priority happens to be. Like I remember that an important phone call in the middle of something, and I need to make that call because I promised to make it, but I can then return to that priority activity fairly quickly, and distractions aren't necessarily our fault. However, the management of the distractions, that's what is truly our responsibility. And without awareness and without that ability to redirect ourselves, distractions become habits and they then begin to interfere with the focus that's really necessary to do the important things that we want to do in life and also that create the life we want.
Well, what are some of the common distractions?
Well, I think the easiest distinction is really to think in terms of there are external triggers or external cues, and then there are also internal triggers and internal cues, and we need to consider both since really all behaviors are prompted by either or both of these.
Well, that's really, it's pretty straightforward. So the external triggers would be those sounds and lights that our devices make when there's a notification.
That's right.
Or the TV or the text or the unexpected phone call. or a coworker when you're, at the office stopping by to chat, that sort of thing. And of course, there's those email headers, we're familiar with all the time. So, are those the triggers you're talking about?
That's exactly it, Anna. Those are the external triggers, and then the internal triggers or the internal cues would include could be our thoughts, our feelings, any physical sensations that we have. And think about it. When we have any kind of pain or we feel restless or tension, or even if there's a sense of anxiety, anxiety is really a cluster of physical sensations and also thoughts. But also there are internal cues like hunger and stress of all kinds. So anything that mental, emotional, physical experiences, anything that really calls our attention, pulls our attention away. And it's not always about being uncomfortable. Sometimes, I can be distracted by good feelings as well. Maybe it's a memory that I've had or something that I'm thinking about that wonderful sense of happiness, kind of comes up in my awareness. So it's not always negative.
Yeah. So, well, that's quite a laundry list.
Oh,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting though that many of the internal cues are uncomfortable? Kind of like pain, there's pain there, there's tension, sometimes there's hunger. So the distraction likely has a purpose of some sort.
Well, that's a really good observation, Anna. And as we've discussed in the past, we're inherently wired to move away from discomfort. So this isn't always a bad thing. I mean, we need to be aware of what the motive is behind the distraction and also what the cost is. There can be costs to using distractions to avoid situations or people or events, and the activity itself isn't bad or wrong. What we want to do is we want to investigate what's behind it.
So it seems like it has a lot to do with when and how we use the distraction.
Well, yes. And it's when the distraction interferes with us staying present in our lives or when it disrupts us facing important challenges or keeping our commitments, either to ourselves or to others. And when we seek to avoid stress or anxiety by using distractions, it gives it a sense of, it's kind of becomes kind of a compulsive quality to it. So we very often kind of go on that autopilot that we've talked about, and in these situations, we might reach for something like food or social media, alcohol, drugs, whatever it might be, to avoid the feelings, to avoid the stress of the discomfort.
Well, yes, I can see where reaching for something that provides relief could quickly become a habit.
Well, yes. And for some people who struggle with trauma or shame or maybe complicated grief, distractions may be a way to avoid really, horrible feelings, maybe a way to cope or manage the distress that they're experiencing. So giving distractions a blanket label of bad isn't realistic. It requires each of us as individuals to really assess the distractions in our life and to personally determine, are they healthy or are they unhealthy?
Well, this sounds very interesting. Let's give it a try.
Well, sure. And let's begin by naming some of our favorite distractions. So I have to go in, and it's usually a very personal thing, looking at what are the distractions that take us away from the important tasks? What are the distractions that maybe take me away from commitments or important relationships? Things like compulsively scrolling social media or texts or interrupting mealtime, dining out, by looking at text or checking emails, or doing it during times when I need to be doing something else, or reading emails that aren't pertinent to the task at hand. Now, I find a lot of people tell me about how they get drawn away during their workday because all of a sudden there's one email that they see and they start on that and they have lost their focus on what they need to do. So it's about moving away from the pertinent task at hand. And then we need to look at what drives the behavior. What's the root cause? So we're looking at how we're using the distraction compulsively. I'm really turning toward myself and asking the questions, what am I trying to escape from? What is the discomfort that's going on that I feel like I can't stay in my attention and I can't stay focused on what's important. So what am I trying to avoid? And what uncomfortable feelings maybe I'm trying to avoid? Could be boredom or loneliness or insecurity or uncertainty. It's also about checking out the feelings and the thoughts behind the urge. And sometimes this is anxiety, can be worry, or sometimes I'm just really being judgmental or self-critical, these kind of self-defeating thoughts. So it also can be very helpful to sense into the body, to really notice where is that restlessness, that tension. So I'm facing into what's happening to me. Might even want to do a body scan just to quiet things down so I can really tune into myself and say, what's showing up here?
So once again, we're not resisting the urge to distract ourselves, but turning toward the urge and investigating it.
Well, that's right, Anna. And the research actually shows that resisting urges can sometimes backfire and sometimes create cravings, or sometimes we begin to ruminate about that thing that we're trying to resist. And this can really escalate any desire we have for that distraction. So we have to look at that, but yet on the other hand, if we give in, we might have that momentary relief of the tension, but we're creating really a considerably long-term bad habit if we continue to do it. And this is etched in our neural pathways. So a healthy process is to explore with the present moment awareness, really what's going on in the moment. We've talked about this since the beginning of our conversations. Really requires, when I turn toward myself, it really requires that I have to be in this moment. We're exploring our thoughts and our feelings and our body sensations, the impulses that are arising. And we're doing this with a real sense of curiosity. What's up with me? So there's kindness, and we have to be willing to do it again and again because we're making time to deliberately focus our attention on what's showing up, deepening our self discovery and rewiring the brain by training it to focus on our awareness and our intentions. So we're discovering what we're doing and why.
Yes, and we're assessing the distraction as well, right?
Well, that's right. And the appropriateness of the distraction, and a relationship to it as well. It kind of falls into three categories, Anna. It's about what I'm focused on, and am I in control of what I'm focused on? Is it a conscious choice that I'm doing this? And then, is it an appropriate time to be focused on this?
Well, Dr. Jane, let's talk about how this plays out.
Well, some basic scenarios include, again, this capacity to focus our attention, how much control we have of the distraction, and the appropriateness of the time of the distraction. So when I'm really very attentive, I'm focused, I might be distracted all of a sudden, but I'm aware of it and I'm in control of it. And at that point in time, I get to determine whether it's an okay time or not. And I have the capacity, because of my awareness and because I just determined whether or not it's appropriate, I can stay with it or I can shift away from the distraction. But there's sometimes that we're hijacked, and I'm going about my business, focused on something. I'm distracted by something else and I'm not in control of it. Sometimes I'm not aware of what's happening to me. My attention has been totally diverted. So it's taken away from us, and the priority task is no longer available, and it might not be an appropriate time. And this is where we go into our emails, and all of a sudden, an hour later, I'm going, oh my gosh, I didn't realize what time it was. So that's the hijack. But then there are also times when I can be just kind of what I call kind of spaced out. I'm not really focused and I don't feel like I'm in control of being able to attend to anything. And yet it's not a good time to be kind of aimlessly spacey. So this sometimes happens, in particular situations like emotional overwhelm, or you and I have both talked about this with exhaustion or feeling really burned out. So we're just kind of aimless in, how we're navigating these distractions. But then there's also daydreaming, which is we're not focused. I'm not in control. But you know what? It could be really okay. Sometimes we're not supposed to be attending to anything in particular. The mind is just kind of wandering. It often happens when we're doing those mundane tasks like folding those washcloths or pulling those weeds, or I do it a lot when I'm on hold on the phone. I call it free mental time.
Yes, these are very helpful and very familiar to me. What about other forms of avoiding?
Well, there's another variety of avoiding that I refer to as more in the category of self-sabotage. This category includes things like procrastinating, perfectionism, that self-effacing behavior, which is that inner critic, or maybe self-medicating, using food as a comfort food, or stress eating, drugs, alcohol, or sometimes there are some people who use what we call self-injury or cutting themselves as a way to avoid things that are going on with them. This is just to name a few, and and we're not always aware of these self-sabotaging behaviors, and often even if we are aware of them, sometimes we're at a real loss as how to stop them. What we really need to do to kind of cut it off.
Yes, these have a very serious ring to them.
Well, yes, they can. They can be very serious. And there are multiple interventions for these. Okay, there are behavior therapies and cognitive therapy that can aid in helping individuals really disrupt the conditioned patterns of thoughts and actions. And motivational therapy, works with people who really want to reconnect with their goals and values. But for our purposes, we're not going to go into that severe extreme, you know, um, scenarios. What I want to do is merely highlight some of our favorite self-sabotaging behaviors, namely procrastination, perfectionism, and that self-effacing category, which is the self-critic, that real judgmental part of ourselves. It's that I call it the ruthless super ego. And all three of these evoke anxiety and distress, and they derail our confidence. The saboteurs behind the scenes, maybe that we find ourselves craving for food or alcohol. Some people, crave gambling, or there might be just some more subtle kinds of conditioned behaviors that undermine our sense of self-worth and our self-value along the way. And sometimes this can be fairly routine for some of us, believing we're not good enough. So why even bother with the task? Or can't do the task the way I want to. So, I'm just going to let it go. Or I feel inadequate, so I drop the ball. It's all too much and I feel overwhelmed, so I can't even go there. So avoiding behavior is an effort really to move away from the discomfort and find some safety.
So to determine what, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, but I was going to say, but it's difficult sometimes to even recognize what we're doing, because sometimes the consequences don't show up immediately. Sometimes it's like I'm kind of looking back over my shoulder and say, oh, wow, I've been doing this for a long time. This isn't working for me.
Yeah, so to determine what's up, we plug in an awareness or mindfulness practice to tease out the autopilot game and see what's behind it. Is that right?
Yes. And Anna, it's always about keeping it simple, because we want to be able to do it in the moment. And it's as simple as what we've talked about in the past. Go to the breath. Now, this brings us back into that present moment awareness. Be with the breath, track the breath, just pull all of our attention to the breathing, the in-breath and the out-breath. We could also kind of move into that relaxation response, using a word on the exhale. Clearly, when we're in the distraction, want to move out of it, it's about quieting the body and the mind so that I can begin to ask myself, what's here now? What do I need to do? What's going to help me in the long run? Kind of, what are my thoughts, my feelings, my body sensations? What am I looking to avoid? And also track, what are the conditions that are going on right now? For me, am I tired? Am I bored, anxious, depressed? And what am I doing? What exactly am I doing to avoid this? Am I headed to the fridge again? Or am I losing myself in my social media? And it's also about, what are my priorities? What are my commitments? What's really important? This anchors us into, what are the important things? What are the things that really matter in this moment?
So what you're saying is really diving into what's happening in this moment. So we're in the distraction.
Yeah.
I should say, as we're in the distraction.
As we're in the distraction, absolutely. Yes, because we're really creating, the open, non-judgmental space by operating from this present moment awareness, and then dropping in that inquiry, that question, what's up with me? So we might find that we need to take a break. I might need to shift gears and maybe take a walk to help myself recalibrate, regain my focus and attention. because I want to get back to maintaining my awareness.
Well, Dr. Jane, what else might we consider?
Well, it all boils down to we can minimize distractions. We have to know our priorities, though. We'd have to have a solid sense of what is my goal, whether it's my family, my health, my friends, this project, and make time for what really matters. This requires that we hold our life's meaning and purpose central to how we're planning and how we're scheduling. So I firmly believe that we always need to work with a plan so that we can do what we've talked about in the past, the 3 Rs. We can continue to review it, replicate what's working, remediate what's not working, and do this on a regular basis. And I also think, Anna, that we need to live in routines, and I'm not talking about rigid routines, but consistent routines. Because without knowing really what to do with our time, everything can become a distraction. And we've all had days like this where we kind of float from one thing to the other. It's also about create a daily and a weekly template for what we want to do and when. Some people call these time boxes. So we're really knowing what's important, when we're going to do it, and what we're going to do within that box of time. And this includes checking our emails and texts and social media. And you know what? It's also important to slow down and to schedule that, using quieting practices or walks in nature. This really helps us to recalibrate, and even scheduling free time. We need that flow in our lives. That's part of our creative process. And it's also about boundaries, boundaries for ourselves and for others, reducing the external triggers. Sometimes it's removing those apps that we're not using, or checking out tools that maybe can help us eliminate some of the distractions, like eliminate news feeds or even rearrange our visual clutter, and it's all about cultivating awareness and mindfulness skills so that we can check out the external and external triggers, know when they're happening, and it's always committing to a daily plan, having that continuous improvement that's really a priority, playing to our best and highest selves, playing to a power greater than ourselves, if that's something that we're open to. And the bottom line to all of it is kind of wrapping it all in gratitude.
Yes, gratitude, Dr. Jane. These all fit well into a daily routine, I think for all of us. Lastly, are distractions ever beneficial for us?
Well, isn't that an interesting question on it? Yes, yes. When you think about it, some of the world's greatest innovations, were discovered by people who were looking at one thing and somehow something else showed up, something they weren't even looking for. So creative solutions often appear when we're least expecting them, and daydreaming and letting our minds wander. I mean, it's been shown in research studies that this is psychologically restorative. So it's going to contribute to our creative energies, and with this in mind, we want to consider making time for reflection, being alone with our thoughts and our ideas, and also spending some time, dialoguing with others and engaging with others about ideas that show up for us, and keeping track of new ideas, scheduling time to really be in healthy distractions and align ourselves with the goals, but also align ourselves with, new ideas that may contribute to these goals or help us revise the goals.
Well, Dr. Jane, this is all such valuable information. I really, really have appreciated this conversation, and I thank you for that.
Thank you, Anna.
Until our next conversation.